So does everybody see my screen?
Yep, it looks great.
Perfect. Okay. So just a little bit about myself. So I'm Deb Coyle. I've been a project manager for 25 years, a certified project manager, so senior. So what we're going to do is basically before we start the presentation, before we start the day, we're going to send out some information that we're going to need from our participants, just to get it to prepare themselves for success, so that to think of some projects they can use, and set them up for like some pre-work. So that's how we're going to start. And then basically day one, as you can see here, we're just going to do some introductions. We're going to do introduction to the course, like we'll do a full detailed outline like I'm going to do right now, basically. And then what we're teaching is basically how to run a project. So you're going to pick up a couple projects in mind. And then what we're going to do is we're going to discuss kind of the goal, like what a goal is, why you should use a goal, and then objectives and what an objective is and what success criteria. And once we kind of tell you what that is and give you some examples, like really good examples, and we'll do a lot of hands-on with you to, how does that, like taking one of your projects and walking through, so you're setting up all your goals and objectives and success criteria. And we're going to tell you what, and I think the most important thing is that understanding what those are and how to identify it. Because the reason is that you want to do this is because if you have, like, project management is kind of like a structure and it's a foundation. So once we introduce you to the foundation, you can use this anytime and it's less stressful, because then we're going to give you lots of tools after it to pull as well to use, so that you can define everything that's necessary to a project, and the different stages and how that works. And I think that's basically what our course is, right? So then you're going to give you a break. And then when we talk about resources, we talk about like what you need. So, what kind of, who for people do you need? Who for equipment do you need? Do you need, if you need to use some machines at the university? What happens if you're going diving to get some, coral reefs or whatever, like stuff like that? What is everything that you need for your project to be successful? And then we're going to go through assumptions and constraints, like what an assumption is and a constraint, because what happens is that at the beginning of a project, you want to understand the full length of what you're getting into in the project, in order to be able to define timelines and cost, and so that, you're set up for success. And what a success criteria is by when you're taking all this information and you're gathering it to do this goal and objective, what success criteria do you need to put in place to make it happen? So if I need to dive, what measurement am I putting in place in order to be successful, and making sure that that goal or objective that I was doing is deemed successful instead of a failure? So you have to put measurements in place using SMART goals, and we'll go through all that in the course as well. And then basically that's the first day. That's a very full day, but it's a lot of information, but it's a lot of hands-on. So we're going to give you an example. We're going to give you what you need to do and an example and some cases, and then we're going to work with you to make sure that you're successful, so that it's all hands-on. Oh, there's another person here. Experience setting up a project from the start. So that's kind of the first day, is how to set up the project, what you need to do, and gather all the information. And then the second day is going to also go into more deeper, like what is a risk? Now, we gave a presentation at the university yesterday, and I hear that when you get a lot of funding, the funding agencies are asking about risk now. What kind of risk is the project going to experience? And so that was helpful, because now the funding agencies are asking that. So we're going to go through what a risk is, how you identify risks, how you label risks, like if it's high, medium, or low, how you handle it if you get a risk, how you put a mitigation plan together if you do get introduced to that risk, and how to monitor risks throughout the project. So that's a huge area actually, and putting mitigation plans in place. So we're going to kind of go through that, make sure you're successful there. So we'll introduce it, all the concepts around it, then you'll bring that back to your project and start figuring out what kind of risks are going to affect you and that you're going to have to deal with. Then what we're going to do is that we're going to learn, you're going to learn how to assess your project health. So taking all this information over timelines, we're also going to do when we separate, you're going to have milestones and you're going to have all the objectives and tasks and everything like that. Then what you're going to do is you're going to do it over quarters. So we're going to break it up into quarters for you. And then you're going to be able to break up the tasks and timelines and how much time every task takes. And then over the timelines of the quarters. And then that's also going to help you bring the project risks together. And that's basically day 2. So basically what we've already done is the start of the project, how to set it up, what all the details you need. And then day 2 is basically with all that information. And now you know the timelines and structure, and you feel confident. How do you consistently monitor project health through that whole nightmare, during the length of the project. And then your last day, we're going to go through basically all about how to be productive. So now that you have all this information, you're monitoring the project, how do you handle your work week? So how do you be successful? How do you set up a good work week for you? And we're going to go through all that with you. What can get in the way? What does procrastination look like? How do you handle that? How do you handle yourself and motivate yourself to be able to monitor the projects and making sure that you're hitting all your timelines and stuff like that and being successful. And then that's pretty much it. So basically the whole day will be how to deal with your procrastination that we all have and how to stay motivated through the day. So that's basically the third day. And then lots of hands-on. Basically, that's what it is. This course will be learning, but a lot of hands-on fun activities and giving you all the tools that you need at the end to be successful. Basically, you're going to walk away with a bunch of templates and tracking tools. And then this is another thing of what tools can you use to be successful and to monitor how you're doing as an individual and how the projects are doing. And then, so that's basically the 3 exciting, impactful days. Any questions? Quiet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just muted and unmuted myself or something. One of my questions is, what is the audience for this? Is it for people who are completely new to project management?
I think it's for everybody, right? Because it's managing. So basically, if you think of projects, right, you can think of it either as a project, or you can think about it even as going on a trip or organizing your schooling for prepping for a test or anything like that, right? Or leading people, being a professor and leading people. So basically, we've designed it where it doesn't matter what. If you could be new, you can be in the middle of your profession or a professor, it doesn't matter. It's all the same concept, right? Taking something that's big, something that you need to plan for, and then bringing it through the different stages for success. So I would say that we hit, like yesterday when we were doing it at the university in LA, pretty much we had a different variety of people, and it worked well for all of them. They basically took something out of it that they can all use.
Thank you.
Not a problem. Like, I guess what this real course, like what it's gonna do for you is it's going to prep you for success. So you don't have to worry about anything, like everything is under control. Because when you start something, it is so hard to know where you start. Like, how do you start a project, or how do you start anything in life, really? Like, what do you need, and how do you monitor it? And how do you know you're behind? You know, how do you know you're in the red? How do you know you're never gonna be able to recover from it? Like all that stuff, it's kind of nice to just really just get the tools and the structure so you can bring anything in life through that process is really what we're teaching.
That's great. Wonderful. If no one has any additional questions right now, we can go ahead and move on to the next workshop. And then if anyone comes up with any other questions, we can take care of them during the Q&A session that will be at the end of today's webinar. Hannah, I believe you were going to go next.
Sure. Let's see, can I override? Zoom keeps updating and being fancier. All right. So I am Hannah Scherer. I'm a faculty member at Virginia Tech. And I thought I would start by just sharing the overall kind of structure of the program for the rendezvous for those of you who haven't attended yet, or if you've kind of looked at this and been overwhelmed. So just to situate you, Deb just gave us a great overview of one of the morning workshops. So that one is here, this interactive tools for project management in academia. So you can structure your rendezvous experience around these deep dive morning workshops. And in a minute, we're going to hear from Catherine on another one, which could be a good pairing if you're thinking about organizing your life in terms of operation manuals for research groups. But you may have an interest in like jumping around and thinking about other stuff. But the morning really gives you a chance to be in community with people who are grappling with something similar and learn from facilitators. So for example, I think about systems all of the time. So I've registered for this one around kind of wrapping your head around environmental problems by leveraging feedback loop thinking. And that ties into my workshop in the afternoon. So the afternoon is much more flexible. You have the contributed program, and then what the rendezvous calls mini workshops. So these you don't have to choose in advance, and they're 2.5 hours. So still enough time to get your head around something, but a little bit shorter than the morning deep dives. And so there's lots of things to choose from. My session is this one. And so I'm glad that that's on the same day as the one that I really was excited about going to. So I can kind of be thinking about systems throughout the day. And hopefully be with some of the same people. So I just thought I'd do that to give you a little orientation to the kinds of workshops that we're speaking about today. So to introduce my workshop, I just have a question for you, which is, how have you interacted with these systems today? And if you feel like putting something in the chat, feel free, or you can just think about that on your own. I don't know how to find the chat in this new version of Zoom. Let me see. Nope, that stopped sharing. Well, I'll let things, there we go. Okay, I can see that. So hopefully most people have eaten today. We're towards the end of, at least it's 3:20 on the East Coast. Hopefully everyone's eaten with something. And probably you have interacted with all of them by this point in the day. I see some people are chiming in. And then my next question for you is just to think about, and again, feel free to put ideas in the chat, what geoscience topics support learning about these systems? I now am in an agricultural education space, so I think about soil sciences a lot and that interaction. Thanks, Emma, not enough interaction with the energy system today. Any thoughts on geoscience topics? Terroir, yeah. So think about wine or other things that now people are talking about it with cheese, which I love because I love cheese. But certainly, you can think about like even something as basic as the water cycle, right? It's not just isolated water by itself, right? And as we start to think about the reason why we care about these three systems is that they're really, they could just happen in nature on their own, but we care about them primarily because civilization really depends on access to these three resources. So a lot of, not all, but a lot of the major resource challenges that we're facing globally are grounded in this idea of the food, energy, and water nexus. So that these things are not just isolated systems, right? But that really there's trade-offs in how these three resource systems interact and decision-making about how we think about, for example, water use. Do we use it for building dams? Do we use it for irrigation for agriculture? Do we use it just for consumption for people? These things, there's a finite resource and we have to think about trade-offs here. So that's kind of the conceptual space that my workshop is focused on. And it's a really powerful framework, this idea of a nexus for thinking about natural systems and their human dimensions. Some folks that research in this space use the phrase coupled human and natural systems, which they really are, right? In the way that we live today. So the work that my group has been doing a lot lately is thinking about, well, this is a super powerful framework that everybody interacts with every day. So there's a lot of potential for education using this framework. And we know that it's happening in lots of different educational contexts, which is why I'm excited to be able to do this workshop at the Rendezvous, because there's so many different types of educators, from formal PK-12 classroom, undergraduate and graduate programs, informal and non-formal education environments. Like, people are grappling with this in a lot of different spaces. And so we're also kind of collectively trying to define what this education can look like. And through the group that I'm involved in, we've come up with a lot of great things that intersect with things that I know geoscience education folks also think about, this idea of really interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary problem spaces, complex systems thinking, sustainability, thinking about stakeholders, and then some of the things that we try to accomplish through science education, right? Like evidence-based reasoning, getting people involved in citizen science. How do we consider equity and environmental justice, not just in our science, but also in our teaching? So all of these things, and you could probably add more to this list of things that really could happen in FEW-Nexus-based education. And so as a group, we're really working to collectively continue to define that. So that's really the focus of our workshop. It's ambitious for 2.5 hours, but we're really thinking about how do we continue to improve food, energy, water nexus-based education. And what the focus of this research or this workshop is really about defining how do we think about new education research directions that are coming from problems of practice. And that's another thing that I love about the Rendezvous is there are education research folks that are always wanting to come up with new questions to answer. And there are practitioners who are always encountering their own ideas in the classroom. And wouldn't it be great if somebody studied this piece so that I could solve this problem in the classroom better? So that's really what we're going to do with our workshop. My co-presenters are, who weren't able to join me today, are Chandrika Burrell at Morgan State and Doug Lombardi at University of Maryland, College Park. And so we're really excited to bring this to the Rendezvous. Our objectives, I think I've talked about all of these, but really the plan is to try to continue to define and describe FEW-Nexus-based education. So folks that have new ideas about this, we want to hear them. And think about these challenges and try to collectively ideate ways that we can move geoscience education research forward in this space so that we're generating new knowledge to address these challenges. So why should you come? I think about this problem face all the time, and I think everybody else should, is the short answer. But I really do think it's a highly generative real world context for teaching in a lot of different content areas. And within the earth sciences, there's a lot of overlap and a lot of possibilities. The whole rendezvous is an interactive, collaborative environment, and we're really going to focus on fostering that in our workshop. Generate your own new ideas for teaching and education research. And it's just the tip of the iceberg. So this work is funded through the National Science Foundation right now, and I am currently the director of the National Collaborative for Research on Food, Energy, and Water Education, which is NCFEW for short. So that's another thing that we, through this workshop, we're hoping to broaden our community, to bring more people who are interested in this kind of into this space and help people see how they can plug in. Really trying to foster collaboration around possibilities for practice. So that's kind of, we'll share some more concrete examples at the workshop, and hopefully get people continuing to collaborate past our little short workshop. So that, I will stop there and figure out how to stop sharing my screen. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Is there a particular level of student or student age group that your workshop is focused on with regard to the education research piece?
No, I think that, so our collective has, as I said, there's like the formal PK-12, which goes all the way across. We have higher education, which includes community colleges through graduate programs, and informal and non-formal spaces. So we're really trying to be expansive in how we think about this, because it's something that really permeates everybody in their everyday life, as well as potential for classroom and non-formal learning. I think we've seen over the years that we've been kind of working in this space, collaboration across educational contexts has been really generative. Things that college professors are developing are actually like really useful for high school teachers to think about, oh, that's a nugget that I can bring down to my students' level, for example. So definitely we're interested in folks that are either researching problems of practice in any of those contexts, as well as people who are teaching or facilitating in lots of different contexts.
Wonderful. Did anyone else have any questions that are pressing that can't quite wait for the Q&A at the end of today's session? Well, not hearing anyone, let's go ahead and turn it over to Catherine.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you, Hannah, for sharing the structure of the rendezvous too. If you have known me for any length of time, you may have heard me use the phrase GeoEd summer camp, which is how I like to think of the rendezvous, because it's the kind of professional development that I want to go to all year long. But it's at the perfect time where I actually have time to put into practice between the professional development and when I start teaching. So like getting to go to Hannah's mini workshop or Deb's morning workshop means that I have enough time between July and September, late August, to kind of integrate those best practices that I learned. And I call it summer camp, GeoEd summer camp, because it's like all of the friends who I want to hang out with are there. And y'all are them too. So I wanted to share a workshop. Let me just open up my slides there. Perfect. To share what we're doing at the rendezvous this year. I am helping lead a Thursday, Friday morning workshop. So in between the shorter mini workshop, like what Hannah's leading, or the longer Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday workshop, like what Deb's leading. We've got a Thursday, Friday workshop that we hope many of you will be interested in, or know colleagues who might be interested in, on developing collaborative operations manuals for research groups. So really quickly, I'll introduce myself and my co-presenter. I am Dr. Catherine Ryker. I'm at the University of South Carolina. And this is Jonathan Ryker. He will also be at the workshop, wearing NAGT gear, of course, or a rendezvous onesie. Haven't decided yet. There's some options. I am going to be presenting with Dr. Laura Lukes, who's in British Columbia, and Dr. Annie Kleiss, who's at Vanderbilt University. The three of us were part of an interest group that met together last summer and checked in over the course of the summer trying to develop these operating manuals for our lab. So we acknowledge that students in our lab often have questions that are the same or similar from year to year. Things like, how do I publish? What does authorship look like? How do I get funds? Can I come work in your lab? What does that look like? How do I get started? There's my dog. How do I get started? And we wanted to help our students by finding a spot to put all of our expectations in the same place so that students weren't relying on us necessarily remembering all of those bits and pieces of information and telling them all those things kind of over and over again, but there was one sort of spot that they could go to find all of that. At the same time, we recognized that none of us had been trained. I mean, Deb showcased a wonderful opportunity to learn about project management. Most geoscientists I know don't have training in project management. Very few have training in sort of how to lead a lab. And so we found that really having the summer interest group that met repeatedly was so helpful to get feedback from others. And so we wanted to bring this workshop to the rendezvous in part to gather people who have said, like, I want to develop an operating manual, or I wish I'd had one of these, or I've been meaning for years to write all this stuff down, and kind of give you time and space to work on that together with some colleagues. So the thought behind having one of these operating manuals is that it makes plain what's sometimes called the hidden curriculum of research, of grad school, of college. Can help improve your lab efficiency and productivity because people can find information, access information more quickly, and facilitate onboarding of new members. I think about in my lab, before anyone gets started with anything, the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to finish or to take the city training for working with data on human subjects. You know, bar none, no matter what your project area is, that's where you're getting started. And so things like that are helpful for students to know that they have a little task list that they can work on before their project kicks into high gear. It helps us ensure consistent research practices and data quality. Data storage is great. And then I can give a real world example. We've had several students graduate from my lab in the last year. And so, you know, we've had some personnel transferring out of the lab at graduation and then others starting their projects. And, you know, I really want my more experienced lab members to write down what they've learned to help future members, even after they've graduated. And then for things like family leave. So I've been out or was out this spring semester to welcome this little nugget into the world. And so during that time, my students still had access to our operating manual to help guide them. And again, just remind them of things about just kind of how the lab works or how research works. That was really helpful. So I thought I'd pause here and pull on some of the knowledge in the chat because I see some familiar names and people who I know have experienced either mentoring or being mentored, both good and bad. And so I thought I'd ask this question: what's something you wish every student working in your lab knew, or what essential information should a research lab operating or operations manual include? I'll ask you to think on that for 30 seconds or so and start putting some possibilities in the chat. Mhm. Yeah, really basic but great one. How to contact me. What's your preferred communication style? Do you prefer texting? Do you prefer emailing? Can students drop in? Do you have open office hours? All of those are things that a student might at least initially have to guess out before they learn your style. And so it can be really helpful to just spell that out. Here's how to get in touch with me. Here's how quickly you should expect a response. If you're contacting me about a letter of recommendation, what do you need to include? If you're contacting me to set up a meeting, here are my expectations for that. Yeah, all that communication of style and frequency. Yeah, how often do I expect to hear from you? Because I want to hear from my students all the time, but some prefer a much more structured check-in, maybe that's weekly or monthly. Data storage and retention transfer, yeah, so challenging for a student who's particularly one who's new to research to know how to hand that off and what format it needs to be in. Oh my gosh, Ashley, thank you for sharing that one. The values around conflict management. Yeah, those could absolutely go in an operating manual. I think it would be really helpful for a student to even know, hey, if I'm starting to perceive conflict, what are some good first steps? That first step of the conflict management, and then if it escalates beyond maybe just like a lab member to a lab member, who do I seek out? Or if my conflict is with my advisor, who can I seek out? What are my courses of action? Including that would be great. Yeah, those are all great options. I'm going to ask one more. And that's, what are some questions that a student researcher might be nervous to ask? And actually, I might even draw on that conflict management example again there. Yeah, what if they messed up? What happens? They've submitted an abstract that you've signed off on. There's data in there that you had seen run, but they realized that underlying your code, there was some problem with the initial data entry. How do I proceed? What do I do? I shared a graph with you at last week's meeting, and then I realized that actually I did something wrong. I pulled the wrong set of data. It was for a different semester. How do I let you know that? Oh my gosh, expectations for working hours. I can tell Emma has experience with grad school life in the very recent past, current. Yeah, what is this amorphous thing called grad school? What are expectations if I'm working in your lab? What does that mean? Is that 2 to 3 hours a week? Is that 20 hours? How does that relate to my IA or TA role with the department? How to ask for accommodations when they need more time. Yeah, how to be, or whether you can be straightforward about just saying, hey, this is a deadline we set together. I need more time. Here's why. Here's the new deadline that I'd like to be held to. Or when can an accommodation be honored, and when is it a hard deadline or a hard rule or something about someone being able to, again, I'll just use the attend a conference. Your data has to be analyzed by X number of weeks before the abstract submission, something like that. So yeah, how to approach, how to ask about those things. And those are all things that can raise some anxiety for students if they're not sure what that information looks like or the answers to those questions are. And so putting some of those things down into an operating manual can help relieve some anxiety and some nerves from students. It can help clarify for new students, these are the expectations that I'm going to be held to if I join this lab. And if I'm not a good fit for whatever reason, if it doesn't sound like I mesh with the culture of the lab, then I know that up front. And I can make other decisions about how to spend my time, which is super useful. So a lot of what we've sort of put in the chat, and thank you for contributing here, are what we can think of as those pieces of the hidden curriculum. They're things that it's not easy to look up. You're not typically going to find it on the university website. But it is really helpful to have written down. Oh, hey, Squish. Speaking of accommodations, thank you for accommodating my turkey bird. And so what the sort of structure of the workshop over the 2 days at the rendezvous, what we hope to help participants do is to create an outline of what the answers to those questions. What's the necessary information to put in that manual? What's missing? What are things you might not have thought through? You know, maybe even just reading through the chat, you thought, oh man, yeah, I never thought to ask my advisor that, or my advisor never thought to say that, or never thought to say only work 40 hours a week. You know, what are things that other people are including? Hey, I could write a section on that. You know, it's really helpful to develop those things with some other peers. So we'll have some opportunities to get feedback on sections, feedback on draft text that you might be thinking to include in a lab manual. Thinking through how to involve lab members in the development or ongoing management of a lab manual. And then with that, how to plan for issues of version control or updating your lab manual. And so I wanted to give an example here. Let me switch to this other tab. And this is linked on the slides, and the slides, I believe, Ashley posted them on the workshop page if anyone's interested in poking around. So this is the homepage for our lab. This is a website that we set up last summer. And basically what I ask my students to do is to answer some very similar questions to the one that I posed to the group here. Is what do you wish you knew? What are questions that other students have? Oh, thank you, actually. What are questions that other students have asked you? Again, what do you wish you knew when you were getting started? And so we've tried to go through and fill this out with different sections. And so if you're a new student to the lab, and let's say, you know, I'm here, I'm in, I'm ready to be onboarded. Here are some resources on how to get started. Here's a strategic plan that one of our students developed where you can download a personal tracker with all the necessary timelines according to the grad school, according to our department, and help you kind of think through like what you want to do during your graduate experience in our lab or undergraduate experience in our lab. And some of these are still in development, I will say that. Or, you know, as a graduate student specifically, there are some issues, some of them that y'all have already talked about, you know, how to handle data and deliverables. You know, what are you going to do with your data? What are the expectations for what you leave behind in the lab, what you take with you? Are there specific things that you want to consider about, you know, while you're here, I want to apply. That's great. Here's a whole list of potential funding resources and places that I'm aware of. And the key thing here is that students are asked to add more to the lab manual as they see things that could be added or need to be added or need some work. Like, oh man, this language isn't quite right. Let's fix it. And even one like, you know, I heard Hannah said, you know, how to contact me, you know, best practices for communicating. Oh my gosh, like just these are some things that, you know, keep emails on a topic, to one topic on a single thread. Please keep things in the same chain. If I don't get back to you in 2 to 3 business days, please feel free to nudge me right away. Put urgent in the subject line. I'll do my best to keep up, but sometimes things slip through the cracks or I'm at a conference. And so just letting students know that, hey, if you don't hear from me, it's okay to nudge me. But I will try to get back to you as soon as possible. And then some kind of rules that I follow about social media, basically that I will accept friend requests, but I will not send them out to students so that, you know, they don't feel any pressure to connect with me. And then just, you know, I won't be offended if you don't want to friend me. That's perfectly fine too. And then talk to my past students, you know, another good thing, especially as you're thinking about joining the lab. So we'll share some examples that Laura, Annie, and I have come up with. Jonathan's contributions, all of our student contributions over the last year, working to kind of maintain those, update them, things that we're still working on and through. You know, we'll be participants as much as leaders in this too, because I know all of us have things that we're wanting to add to our lab manuals. So our goals, like singing. Our goals and our audience, you know, goals are to identify the information that should be included in a lab manual, including those ones that y'all have shared that might be difficult to ask an advisor about. One that didn't come up explicitly, but I've heard from multiple grad students, of course, vacation time. What is that? How does one take it? What are your expectations for me telling you I'm taking a half day mental health day? You know, unless we had a meeting, go. You know, if it's going to be a longer stretch, you know, please do check in with me and let me know. in the workshop, you'll get to start or outline a draft document that you want to take forward to your lab, whether that's your current lab or a future lab. If you're a grad student just thinking about, hey, I'm interested in running a lab one day, what might that look like? How am I going to communicate with my students? And then think through a plan to keep those research documents, group documents updated. So who's a good fit for this lab? Pretty much anyone. We're really hopeful that we can include people with a range of experiences. Some of you may have detailed operating manuals already that you're just trying to think through the version control issues or bringing in student voices. Or you may be someone who doesn't have one of these documents yet, but it's it's been on the list of things that I want to do when I find time. Well, we have found you some time. It is Thursday, Friday morning at the rendezvous. So we hope to see you there. And I would be happy to take any questions. That's not a question, that's a statement. I would say as you're thinking through them or thinking through questions for the other presenters too, I think if you've heard anything today where you're like, oh my gosh, I have a colleague who needs to sit in on that workshop, like that's right up their alley. Please do share the information with them. We'd love to get a big crew in each of these workshops and mini workshops. And the more friends that show up to GeoEd summer camp, the better. So yes, please share the information or anything that sounds like a good fit for someone else. We consider that baby applause.
Thank you. Wonderful. So we can go ahead and move into the Q&A portion. Does anyone have any questions for our wonderful presenters today?
That can be questions about our specific workshops or the rendezvous in general. We've got happy to field those as well.
Yeah, having been, this will be my 10th rendezvous.
Wow.
I am thrilled to get to go back. I just think it's one of the best things that I've done for my personal and professional development is to have this time and space every summer with 250, 300, 350 of the other people in the community that, you know, really value teaching, whether it's, as Hannah talked about, on the practice side, on the research side, somewhere in between. It's just fun. There's a good long block for lunch, so you can network and collaborate with colleagues. I know a couple of people on here who have been to the rendezvous before, so they may have other perspectives there too. Will this workshop be a good fit for a graduate student to attend? Absolutely. Thank you, Emma, for asking that. Yeah, I think this would be great. I wish I had had training in grad school on how to write a lab manual. It was something that I felt very unqualified to do when I first sat down and started working on mine like 10 years ago. And certainly not something that I had online. It was like a Word document. I was like, this isn't pretty. No, it doesn't have to be pretty. But it's something that I think there's not a ton of opportunities to get particularly discipline specific training in how to develop that kind of manual. So a grad student would be a great fit for this. As would maybe a teaching focused faculty who regularly supervises undergraduate theses. You know, that's another kind of use case for a manual is if you're supervising a lot of honors thesis projects for students, you're probably answering a lot of questions, similar questions repeatedly, great questions, but on repeat. And so you could use the time to develop something for future supervision or current supervision.
I think I have a similar question for you, Deb. Well, maybe not a similar question, but there are times when you're a part of a project, but you're not necessarily the central decision maker, for example. Will your workshop be touching on that experience at all as well and kind of strategies for trying to influence people?
So we'll also include things like a team charter, we call it, and then who the decisions makers are and how you approach them, and the whole decision making and escalation process as well. So yes.
Deb, I have a question for you. Do you have a favorite project management software or program that you use?
So that's funny that you're mentioning that, because me and Amanda are thinking of building one. Because now that we know what everybody needs, it kind of, because I use a bunch. I use Jira, because that's a task management tool of and you can put all your tasks in there, and then it shows you in red if something's behind schedule, and you're allowed to break it down a little bit more. So I use Jira, I use project management, which is Microsoft. I use Microsoft Project as well. That's also a good one, but that's costs a lot of money, right? Jira is kind of free. So if we also have a video to show how to use Jira and the benefits of that to keep you on track. So yes, Jira would be definitely my favorite.
Just because I know we have a couple people who have been to the rendezvous before, is there a favorite interaction or connection that you've made at a past rendezvous?
So you know what? I've never been at one yet. So this will be my first experience.
You're one of the people I'm hoping to connect with.
Right? So I think it's good. I'm looking forward to it. It's exciting. I think it's, like just talking and new connections and getting ideas and sharing is just amazing. Yeah. And just the hands-on, right? Like I'm really looking forward to, there's a lot of hands-on here, which like it's good, because when you're teaching, people want knowledge, so they're like learn, but it's nice to know that you can take the time to actually give people time to experience it and learn it, hands-on. That's what I'm really looking forward to.
Hannah, do you have any favorite connections or learnings or memories from past rendezvous?
Oh gosh. I'm just excited to go back. I've missed the last two. So I haven't been, I participated in the virtual ones, but I haven't been in person since pre-COVID. So I'm just very excited for running into people. That's what I miss. And yeah, I think a lot of I used to be a geologist, and now I'm in a different department that doesn't have geoscience people. So this is my time to get back to those roots. And I think, I love interdisciplinary work and I love working with all of the folks that I do, but it's also fun to just be around earth science nerds also, but who care about teaching. So yeah, I think the variety of things that happen is a little overwhelming, but also really great. So yeah, I don't know. I have a hard time picking out anything specific, but one of the, I think it was the first or second rendezvous, for some reason, somebody asked me to do a workshop about systems thinking. And I know I had been grappling with it as I was working on some curriculum stuff when I was, for those who are familiar with Integrate, I was trying to think about how I was supporting systems thinking in my teaching, and somebody thought that I would be good at doing a workshop, and it kind of kickstarted a lot of the work that I do now in systems thinking. So I think it's a great community that really lifts up talent and lifts up people who have good ideas. And, I know when I was a co-chair, we worked hard to try to make up the process for people to be able to propose things, right? So that it's everybody's conference, right? If you have an idea, there's so many different ways to contribute to it. And everybody's a facilitator, whether you're formally facilitating or participating, because everything is so participatory, we all have something to contribute. So I just love it. That's why I keep coming back, and I've been really sad that I haven't been able to come the last two. So I'm just really excited to be back.
What about you, Catherine? Do you have a favorite interaction?
You know, kind of like Hannah, there's such a blend from year to year, but I think my favorite is really, I think the long morning workshops in general, because you just have this time, to really like sink into something that maybe you've been meaning to, or maybe you do independently on your own campus, but you know, you get to do it with friends, with peers, with colleagues, or as one of my friends says, with frolics, friends and colleagues. And it's just having that structured time with folks who have kind of built in those opportunities, as Deb said, for really active, engaged, putting into practice what you're learning. I always leave the rendezvous with new teaching activities, with new research ideas, with new collaborations. Maybe it's just because I haven't engaged enough with the food part of the food, energy, water nexus today, but like I think one of my favorite things is just the lunches. Like there's always this long lunch block, and like every day I feel like you're just kind of grabbing 5, 6, 7 people and kind of going, anybody want Thai food? And also to discuss terroir, like, and you'll have 5 to 6 people who are like, I love Thai and terroir. Let's go. Let's start walking. So it's just a really fun, collaborative, you know, positive energy kind of experience, which I love. Thai and terroir.
Let's make it happen.
Yeah, and I think like another important big picture thing with the rendezvous is after this year, it's going to every other year, with the off years having different kinds of virtual opportunities to engage. But that's it.
Yeah, so if you've been meaning to get to a rendezvous or meaning to get back to a rendezvous, then 2024 is a great one to come to, because if you don't make it in 2024, you're gonna have a gap until 2026.
Right, right. Are there any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead then and move us into our conclusion. Let me share my screen again. This is the one. Here we are. Next slide. Wonderful. Right. Thank you everyone for joining us for today's webinar. As Catherine said, I'll post the slides and links and any other resources that were mentioned. Maybe I'll add a link to Jira under the resources section. And I'll send out an email when all of that's added. And also the recording of this will also be posted on the page. Just hang tight a little bit before that gets posted, because we do send it out for captioning to make it more accessible. And on my slide here, you see that it looks very similar to the first slide. And that's because our next webinar will be even more workshop leaders sharing about their EER workshops for this coming year. And I am very excited. So please, if you haven't yet, register for that. And that will be next week, Tuesday, May 14th, same time, same place. And thank you again to Deb, Hannah, and Catherine for taking the time to tell us about your wonderful workshops this summer.
Thank you. Thank you for
Good.
organizing it.
The last piece is just, please, if you have the time, fill out the end of webinar survey. And if you'd like to get a certificate of attendance, you can get to that form through filling out the evaluation. Alrighty. Thank you, everyone. Happy Tuesday.
Thank you. Happy Tuesday. Wait,
Bye.
Wednesday, what are we on?